So this is a house that I've wanted to explore for years. I've driven past it many times. It's not far from a friend of mine's house. I'm not going to tell you where it is, but there are plenty of clues as to where this location is. So I get the feeling that this place is actually, to some degree, it's staged almost. Whoever owns this place, I think, is having a little bit of a good time with all the locals and all the people coming over to explore. Which, there's more and more of us out there poking around and checking out urbex sites, and there's forums and Facebook groups, and I can't even imagine there's probably all kinds of crazy wild stuff on the dark web. But this place is pretty wild. So it's quite overgrown. I would imagine it's gonna be much worse in coming weeks and months as things get even more, all the weeds pop up and all these vines and everything else come to life. It's probably going to be even more closed off. I didn't have a machete or anything else to cut through anything, and since it's not, this baby carriage is crazy. I'm always not going to be hacking at vines and things where it's not my property. It wouldn't be my place. But this place is pretty wild. So there's collapsed chicken coops and like a barn, but there's just this deep pit in the back between the chicken coops and the barn and the house. In that hole, it's pretty amazing actually how deep it goes. So first thing you're greeted with when you walk in is this fridge. It's pretty wild. Certainly a little more dangerous than most locations I've been to. Well, I shouldn't say than most, but above average in terms of danger if you're not paying attention. Plenty of places that you could fall through, or plenty of places where it looks like the floor is about to collapse, or ceilings are very weak and rainwater has come in for years and years. This carriage, or it's so old-timey, I almost want to call it a pram like the British, but that thing was yet a perfect example of, the shoes, all this furniture, the typewriter, the glassware. It seems staged to me. Not in a bad way. I just mean they were selective about what they kept in the house and what they threw out. They were somewhat selective about how just everything, the way it's arranged and whatnot. You'll see what I'm talking about when I head upstairs in a second here. The peeling paint was pretty epic. There's a lot of it. Probably all lead-based. Everything you see that's really loose for paint is probably old lead-based paint. So in that sense, that's another hazard that you're dealing with, really, when you think about it. But yeah, this place is pretty wild. Basically an old farmhouse, and the midday sun was not ideal. I wasn't a big fan of the lighting. It was early afternoon, very bright day, so the lighting was a bit harsh. They call that a witch window, the angled window in the corner of the room. Some nonsense about witches don't have the ability to fly at a 45-degree angle to make it through that window. I don't know. It seems kind of silly. I was speechless when I saw this. Again, how is this not staged? I think it's a perfect example of somebody setting a scene for the sake of, people who are into exploring abandoned places and doing artistic photography and whatnot. This wallpaper was wild. The butterflies and dogs and frogs and the math. It's pretty funny. A lot of squalor, a lot of trash, a lot of homework. There's a lot of paperwork and a science book. This is essentially a portion of, I guess, what would be the attic. That is pretty creepy and messy and has not been cleaned up the way the rest of the house has, and it's probably going to collapse any minute. So I don't recommend going where I did. In these shots here, you can see how devastating any kind of a fall or a collapse would be. A lot of sharp metal and splintered wood and whatnot below you, so you don't want to be falling or potentially walking somewhere the floorboards are really weak and collapsing into this garbage. But again, just use common sense. I guess it's not, common sense is not that common anymore. Is that what they say? This is pretty awesome. 3rd gen slot car track from Tyco. This is a perfect example of how, so sometimes these houses seem so silly, it's ridiculous. I was clearly rolling where I thought it was paused, so sometimes these houses seem a little ridiculous with the mishmash of different eras, and this is like a good example of an abandoned house that is so much older and has, when you first walk in, it actually has almost a early 20th century or late 1800s vibe in some places. But of course there's a refrigerator and there's other things that are modern. The typewriter. But then you look around and there's just stuffs from all over the place. I mean, that slot car track, that's definitely from the 1980s. And I would say I would peg that at 84, 85 probably, something like that. It's pretty wild, really. Alright, anyway, this is pretty crazy too, this whole situation. The ceiling that's about to collapse. The little tiny infant swing. It's clearly from another era. Sorry, I didn't get much sleep last night, and I'm narrating this as I'm driving into work because there was a lot of wild noise and conversation and other things I wanted to, I don't know, even some of my inner monologue sometimes. I kind of decided that I would talk over this video and just kind of give my perspective on this house. Definitely a pretty awesome scenario in terms of the reward to risk. There's no trespassing signs. It's not one of those places where you think, oh geez, I can't go in. People are going to immediately jump all over me, or the neighbors are going to call the cops immediately or whatever. It was actually just sort of sitting there, and that rainbow wallpaper is pretty ridiculous. Some of the poetry and other random nonsense written on the walls is pretty wild too. So, of course, I tried to showcase some of that. The peeling paint. Yeah, these that definitely looks like telephone exchanges from back in the days before you had to use an area code, because the area code would be, the same for within a town. Would never be more than one area code / the first 3 numbers and the second set of numbers, which is 3 in the US. So the way the United States works, if you're from the outside of the US, I'm going to explain something real quick. If you're from the US, I apologize for boring you. So a number in the US might be something like 802-555-7890, right? Let's say. So in that instance, the 802 designates Vermont. All of Vermont is area code 802. And if you have an 802 number, that's Vermont. Well, that next number after 802 is like a local area code. So it, in the case of Andover, Massachusetts, for instance, it used to be 475 was that was their area code in Andover. And so you had the number for northeastern Massachusetts, which was 978, and then 475, and then the last four numbers are effectively your personal number within that town. That's how it used to be when towns were little and there was not as many landlines, not nearly as many landlines. So those numbers you see are actually people's phone numbers, believe it or not. There's just 4 digits written on there, because the assumption is if you're already in that town, you know what the area code and the secondary code are. Alright, anyway, this is pretty wild, this whole situation. The bathroom and light fixtures. There's a lot to see in this place, and it's pretty cool. Again, a lot packed into a small package. It's kind of neat the way they did this. This house is definitely, it's wild. I liked it. I enjoyed seeing something like this in the state that it was in. In other words, this is a very temporary thing. This house is going to collapse in on itself in the coming years. It might not even take decades. It might just take a few years, and it will be done. It's going to get loaded onto the back of a dumpster or a truck in a dumpster in pieces, once an excavator and a bulldozer just flatten everything. And that's inevitable. That's just kind of how it goes. I mean, if society collapses, then I guess you could say maybe it won't. Maybe it'll be just sitting there for decades as a pile of rubble. But in any case, it's not going to be in this state for very long. It's not being maintained. It's falling apart. The wood's rotting. It's not a good scene overall. This math book was entertaining to me. So yeah, I don't know. I know I said I don't know. I was going to say that's about most of it. There's not much I can tell you about it. I don't know the history. Clearly was a farmhouse. In the pit would look like chicken coops to me. But in any case, the location itself is amazing if you can get to it. And again, if you know what you're looking at, if you look long enough, you will find plenty of clues as to where this location is. Pretty wild. I was very excited to see it. It had been a long time since I've been driving by and talked about wanting to see what this place looked like. That baby carriage was one of the coolest elements. Alright, everybody have a great Friday. See you guys later.